Welcome back, y'all. Today I'm coming at you with predictions for UFC Fight Night Kape versus Almabayev. Before we get into that, though, let's have a quick recap of how we did last week. We started off on Thursday with one championship, 171. We ended up going 3 for 4 on that fight card, winning all but the main event. Unfortunately, everybody was massive favorites on this card, and betting money line in this situation just wasn't exactly favorable. I'm working on a lot of stuff on the back end to rectify that, including getting a second model up and running for one championship so that we have some comparative analysis to do and we can decide when to bet for more than one unit. All in all, we ended up losing 0.75 units on the card. After that, we had UFC Cejudo versus Song on Saturday. We ended up cashing on 7 of our 12 wagers here. Unfortunately, we only cashed on a couple of very small underdogs here. And on top of that, we ended up losing out on a pretty sizable favorite in Javid Basharat. We ended up down 2.5 units on the card, and all in all over the weekend, we ended up losing 3.25 units. Not a good look, unfortunately, but looking at the graph, it didn't do a whole lot of damage to our bankroll as a whole, so we're going to keep pressing forward as normal. Before we jump into the card, I'm going to let y'all know I did some bad math before placing our bets this week, so I accidentally overbet our unit size by about 5% today. So you may notice that our totals at the end card are a little higher than you would normally expect. With that out of the way, let's jump into predictions. We'll be kicking off the card with Charles Johnson versus Ramazan Tamirov at flyweight. Johnson is notably older in this matchup, but will also have a substantial height and reach advantage here. Even though he's 34, his record doesn't seem to show it, with a current 4-fight win streak behind him. Tamirov is also on quite a win streak. He's at 10 in a row right now, including his UFC debut in his last fight. At the books, Tamirov is a minus 136 favorite, and both versions of the model are fairly in line with that at 52 and 58% respectively. Because of this, we'll be betting to return 1.5 units on Tamirov here. Our next fight is the first of 2 at women's flyweight, this one between Montana De La Rosa and Luana Carolina. Both of these women have very similar stats straight down the board. Age, very similar. Height, exactly the same. Reach, within 1 inch. And both of them have been away for about 9 months since their last fight. Nothing significant. The one major difference I see between these two is that De La Rosa is 1-3 in her last 4, with that only win coming against Andrea Lee, who hasn't won in several years, while Luana Carolina is on a 3-fight win streak. At the books, this one's very close. Luana Carolina is edging it out there at minus 135. Version 1 and version 2 of the model are split on this one. V1 likes De La Rosa to win the fight as an underdog, while V2 is very slightly leaning towards Luana Carolina. We are still betting V2 right now, so we'll be putting enough to return 1 unit on Carolina here. The next bout, we'll see Lucas Almeida taking on Danny Silva at featherweight. Danny will be the younger fighter by 6 years in this matchup, but both their height and their reach are very similar. Danny's been away for almost an entire year, but Lucas Almeida isn't too terribly far behind him at 260 days. Both guys have pulled out since their last actual fight. At the books, Danny's a minus 200 favorite, and both versions of the model agree with that pretty substantially. We will be putting 3 units on Danny Silva to win this fight. The only other women's fight on this card also takes place at strawweight between Andrea Lee and JJ Aldrich. I already mentioned Andrea Lee today, but let's dig in a little further. She's currently on a 5-fight losing streak. She's gone 5-8 in the UFC, and I'm actually very surprised that she's still signed with the promotion today. Aldrich is a little bit younger. She will be giving up a small amount in both height and reach, but the book odds still have her as a minus 195 favorite. Fortunately, both V1 and V2 agree with that sentiment, at least in my opinion. I think JJ Aldrich is a shoo-in to win this fight by decision. We will be placing enough to return 1.5 units on this fight. Next up at bantamweight, we've got Douglas Silva de Andrade fighting John Castaneda. Douglas is getting up there in age, and he has seen a few decisions in a row recently, but that guy is always dangerous. John Castaneda, he'll be giving up a little bit of height. He'll make it up in reach, and he's significantly younger. 6 years younger when you're talking about 33 to 39 is substantial. But as we've seen lately, age isn't the end-all be-all. At the books, John's a heavy favorite of minus 260, but neither of the models think that the odds should be that far separated. V2 does lean very slightly to John Castaneda, so we will be risking 2.6 units on him. Closing out the prelims will be a featherweight fight between Ricardo Ramos and Kape Mariscal. Seeing as how these two guys have the same record, while Ricardo is younger, taller, and longer, I'm not surprised that V1 sees him as such a substantial favorite. V2 gets a lot more data about the specifics of how fights were finished and what's happened in more recent times. And so I believe that's why it's leaning very slightly to Kape Mariscal in this fight. I'm happy it is. I think he's got a clear advantage here. And so we'll be betting 5 units to return 1 on Kape Mariscal. It looks like we'll be opening the main card with a welterweight scrap between Danny Barlow and Sam Patterson. These two are both finishers. Danny's only been to a few decisions in his career, one being in his last fight, and Sam Patterson has only been to a single decision in his career. Age, height, reach, time since their last fight, all very similar. Given their recent history, it looks like it'll be a battle of styles. Danny Barlow would like to keep this on the feet and look to score a knockout victory, while Sam Patterson will be chasing another submission most likely. The books think that Danny Barlow gets it done to the tune of minus 300. V1 and V2 are split on this, but V2 is leaning very heavily towards Danny Barlow as the favorite. We will be betting him to return 1 unit. We've got one more featherweight fight on the card, this one between William Gomez and the undefeated Haider Emil. I guess everyone's sick of losing money on undefeated fighters this year because Haider is a plus 180 underdog. Gomez does have the advantage in both height and reach here. He's also significantly younger coming into this fight, so V1 of the model also leans towards William Gomez here. But V2 is saying that we should be betting Haider Emil, so we will be taking the undefeated Emil here for 1 unit. There aren't many fights in the heavier weight classes on this card, but we do get this one between Austin Lane and Mario Pinto at heavyweight. Austin will have a small height and reach advantage here, but honestly, the dude just hasn't looked any good since his Contender Series fight. He is a bit older at 37, but at heavyweight, in all reality, being 26 might be more of a disadvantage than being 37 is. Mario Pinto is still undefeated at 9-0, and he's got the majority of his wins by finish. Pinto is a minus 370 favorite at the books. Always dangerous to take those odds in the heavyweight division. Anybody can go to sleep at any time. Both versions of the model agree with the books, so we will be risking enough on Mario Pinto to return 1.5 units. I'm terrified. Next up, we've got the feature bout between Nasrat Haqparast and Esteban Ribovics at lightweight. Both of these guys are riding very nice win streaks right now, with Nasrat at 4 and Esteban at 3, his only loss coming in his UFC debut. These two have been absolute decision machines as of late. Nasrat's been to a decision in 7 of his last 8 fights, and all 3 of Esteban's decisions have come in his 4 UFC bouts. The bookmakers and both versions of the model are leaning substantially towards Esteban Ribovics here, V2 very heavily at 64%. We will be betting Esteban Ribovics here to return 1.5 units with a win. In the co-main event, we have a middleweight matchup between Cody Brundage and Julian Marquez. This isn't a fight that I would say most would consider to be a high-level matchup, but it should be exciting. These guys go out there, they hunt for finishes, and both of them are known for going out on their shield. Cody Brundage is a few years younger, and usually at 30 and 34, that wouldn't really be a big deal. But Julian Marquez has suffered 3 straight knockouts. And so at your mid-30s, at 185, is that enough to make a difference? I don't know. Julian is a slight favorite at the books, but both models are suggesting that we take Cody Brundage at plus 126. We will be risking 1.5 units on the underdog here. Closing out the night, we've got a flyweight bout between Manel Kape and Asu Almabayev. This fight could very easily end up being a title eliminator bout with a convincing enough win. Manel does have a small 1-inch height advantage, and that might actually be notable when you mesh that with his 3-inch reach advantage. He is making a pretty quick turnaround at only 77 days, but even though Almabayev is a late replacement for him, they were both already scheduled for another fight on this card. The bookmakers are giving Manel a pretty substantial edge here at minus 230, but both versions of the model are leaning toward Asu's 17-fight win streak. We will be taking Almabayev here as an underdog for 1.5 units. Having a look at the overview for this card, there are 12 fights on this card. The models were able to make predictions on all of those as normal. It did choose 9 favorites and 3 underdogs on this card. The 2 models were in agreement on 7 of the 12 wagers and 2 of the 3 underdog plays. With my miscalculation, our total risk came out just shy of 35% of our bankroll. Our potential win comes out to 51.12 units, would be a profit of 16.39 units, or a relatively low 47% ROI on this card. That's all we've got for you this week. There are no other major promotions with events this weekend, but you can check out the Patreon if you want to keep up with those in the future. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Good luck on all your bets this weekend. We'll catch you guys next week.